Hey everyone, it's Pal Ponder on Weather. Welcome to Pal Ponder Ultra. We're going to be breaking down the overall mesoscale guidance on this next storm system on the HRRR model. Here's the latest update. We can see the overall upper level low is still hanging out here into portions of New Mexico. Out ahead of it, we've got that cold front, and how you would read this, we've got light rain showers indicated in those green sections down here. But also we've got some pockets of instability with some moderate rain breaking out in those yellow shaded colors. Once you reach the red, that is some heavy rain. So as this system approaches, this cold front is stalling down. So you can follow the time above my head, and we'll move the needle through the afternoon time frame into the early evening. And you can see thunderstorm activity begins to pick up, especially as we head towards the evening time frame. You start to see these reds start to bubble up. That's when things start to get interesting with some heavier rains. And we could be looking at some isolated flash flooding in and around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, just maybe northeast Texas here. That will swing into southeastern portions of Oklahoma. So as we go into the overnight hours, I think that's when we'll start to have the heavier rain. You can see just spokes and spokes of energy moving across into the overnight. And there's another wave as you wake up tomorrow morning for your rush hour traffic. This cold front really doesn't go anywhere. It definitely slows down, if not stalls out on times. So that's why some of these areas could pick up several inches of rainfall, no question about it, as we move through later on this afternoon, especially into the overnight time frame. But going into tomorrow morning, it's still around. So you can see these spokes of energy waiting for that main upper level low to swing through. And once that moves through, that will finally send the all clear sign. But look, that won't be until noon tomorrow. It finally starts to ease out of the western zones into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, goes into East Texas. The heavier rains extend in the northwestern portions of Arkansas here, getting into southern Missouri. So definitely some heavier rains, some good soaking rains in this part of the country as we move through time. It's not really until about 5 o'clock tomorrow. I think that's when we start to be mainly concerned further to the south, where they do have an enhanced risk for severe storms. You start to see these little isolated bubblers here. I think this is when, before this, you'll have more of elevated storms, meaning above the capping inversion. But I do think these things do become surface based once we'll have a little bit of a clearing, once those clouds kind of clear out down in this zone down here into portions of Shreveport and to central Louisiana. I think that's when these storms will become surface based and have more tornadic producing thunderstorms, especially I think between the 5 and the 10 o'clock window. For those 5 hours, I think we have to be mainly concerned about those supercell thunderstorms really maximizing down there in that region and spinning and become and produce several tornadoes, as this nasty squall line will move across portions of Louisiana into Mississippi through the evening time frame on Wednesday, headed into the overnight on Wednesday night into Thursday. So when that happens, the latest HRRR model actually has it a little bit more progressive, meaning it's moving a little bit faster. And so it's pushed the snow line further eastbound on the latest high resolution guidance. It has the heavier snows start to break out in portions of northwestern portions of Missouri here into central Iowa. And then as we really move through time and go through Thursday morning, that's when it rapidly deepens here on the backside into Thursday morning with very heavy snow. These could be picking up 1 to 2 inch per hour snowfall rates in this boundary. And this actually extends into portions of Illinois, as this squall line will be moving across into Alabama by then, and then reaching central Kentucky, going into portions of northern portions of Indiana, putting that snow swath into southern and central Wisconsin as we move through time. And then this one actually only goes out 48 hours. So let's take a look at the overall dew points, because these are amount of moisture that's in the atmosphere. And you can see where this kind of soupy air mass is currently right now. That's the reason why we do have some stronger storms down further south in places like Victoria, into the Houston area. You can see where the warm zone is, where that cold front really kind of takes its sweet time. You stay in the warm sector really all the way through the rest of today into the overnight time frame going into Wednesday morning. That's when the severe threat will start to activate, but I think they don't really become tornadic until around 5 o'clock. Look at the dew points back then. You're talking approaching 70 dew point. That's plenty of fuel to fuel these thunderstorms. Typically, you only really need about 55 to have some, elevated risk for severe weather. So 70 is plenty moist to feed these thunderstorms. And I think that's between, when we get to that 5 and 10 o'clock time frame. So if we take a look at the overall moisture values, this is your precipitable water. So this is an area that we have to look at for this time of year, because this is kind of rare seeing some of these higher amounts. This is about 90 percentile what you would typically see this time of year. Remember, this is February, folks, to start seeing these areas approaching 2-inch per hour rainfall rates, potentially the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. That is a lot for this time of year. So that's why isolated flash flooding could be a concern for these regions as we move through North Texas and East Texas and the southeastern Oklahoma, and especially into Arkansas here. And yeah, going into 5 o'clock tomorrow, that's when I think they become tornadic. Look, I mean, they've got a little bit over 2 inches per hour rainfall potential feeding in from Baton Rouge into the Shreveport area down here in this sector. So that's when we can be looking at those training supercell thunderstorms, between that 5 and 10 o'clock time frame. So I highlighted that because we look at the supercell composite index and we move the needle all the way through to tomorrow morning going into, say, about 5 o'clock. I stopped the clock here, and you can actually see these numbers really kind of expanding and elevating. I think this is when they become more surface based down here in the portions of Louisiana, southeastern Arkansas here, and the northwestern portions of Mississippi. I think this is the favorite area where you do have tornadic supercells between that 5 and 10 o'clock time frame, because you can see that's when the supercell composite is fairly the highest. And once we passed about 10 o'clock, it starts to kind of wind down as all these kind of congeal into a solid squall line and just transfer into a little bit more of a damaging wind threat and more a little bit more progressive type system moving in on the the south side. So if we take a look at the tornadic parameters, they kind of indicate the same thing. So if we move through time, you can see there's not much until about 4, 5, 6 o'clock there. And once we hit that bullseye around 5 o'clock, that's when we see these tornadic parameters really start to elevate a lot higher than what we were seeing this morning. So I think the tornadic potential has definitely increased down here in these areas just for that 5-hour window though. So that's the concern. It really doesn't take much. 5 hours to be on high alert of tornadic supercells is plenty enough. So this is definitely going to be warranted for a tornado watch within these areas, and maybe even some isolated pockets could be upgraded to a 10% potential. And the update overnight from the Storm Prediction Center, right in this area where you see these highest numbers, that I think this is probably your favorite area. If they were to upgrade to this to a 10%, this would be your kind of favorite area for them to do that, because a lot of parameters are indicating that we are increasing the tornadic risk going through that 5, 10 o'clock time frame tomorrow on Wednesday. So now let's take a look at the latest 3K NAM, because that is a little bit slower progression. And I think I'm favoring this one a little bit more, because I do in fact think this first initial wave actually kind of stalls or briefly definitely slows down into the overnight hours. That's where I think it has the most increasing flood potential. On the slowdown, it definitely pulls in more cold air. So that puts snow blanketing through portions of Texas Panhandle, but also northwestern portions of Oklahoma, which the HRRR model doesn't. So that's the difference in the two guidances right now, because this one's a little bit more slower solution, pulling down some of that colder air and maximizing that rainfall potential further south, but also enhancing the snow potential on the western side of this surface low. So once this really deepens and maximizes, then it really starts to crank out once you get into northwestern parts of Missouri, into central Iowa, but especially as you go into that northwestern parts northeastern parts of Iowa, getting into Wisconsin here, I think that's when the snowfall rates could easily approach the 1 to 2 inches per hour up in this sector. And we are going to have a little bit of a wraparound and kind of a kicker system, because there is going to be a little bit more colder air coming in on the backside. And that's when we could ring out some sporadic snow showers in this particular system. But I'm not expecting much from this second half system, because really there's going to be a lot of dry air kind of sneaking in on the backside. So if we take through the latest NAM 12K, this one's favoring in line with the overall 3K NAM. So it kind of enhances the snow on the northwestern portions of Oklahoma, runs it through southeastern portions of Kansas, really deepens it over northwestern portions of Missouri, and then again really starts to intensify over Iowa and getting into Wisconsin. Notice that, as I showed you before, the HRRR was a little bit further south because it's definitely a little bit more progressive on the latest guidance, not reflecting what the 3K NAM and the 12K NAM has. They're more in alignment, and they both have that kicker system as well on the backside, producing at least some snow, kind of on the backside. So here's your first wave on the HRRR. So it's a little bit more progressive, doesn't pull down the cold air enough in time for Oklahoma, but it definitely pulls it in northwestern portions of Missouri, and then it pulls it a little bit further south, giving Illinois a little bit of snow, and then southeastern portions of Iowa, getting into a little bit more southern portions of Wisconsin. But if you take a look at the 3K NAM, a little bit more bullish because it's a slower system. So a slower system pulls in more moisture. It adds snow to the northwestern portions of Oklahoma, southeastern portions of Kansas here, but it really puts the bullseye through the central portions of Iowa, getting that 6 to 10 inch swath and some isolated foot amounts in these regions, and especially into central Wisconsin, going up into the upper peninsula region. And again, the 12K NAM kind of highlights the same thing as the 3K NAM, puts that bullseye in the same particular zones, having at least 6 to 10 inch swath and some isolated zones of getting a foot of snow within this really small sector within the central Iowa into central portions of Wisconsin there. So let's move on to the east. So this system will continue to move across from west to east. So as we move through time, as we go through, into Wednesday, it'll start getting eastbound as we go into the overnight on Wednesday night. Heading into Thursday morning, we'll have that squall line kind of racing across by then. So this will just be a kind of more of a damaging wind threat as this move across. So some of these could be some isolated severe, probably some marginal risk severe storms, further south into the southeast by then, as this squall line kind of definitely separates itself as we get further and further east, as it kind of rips itself apart. The overall parent low will be swinging up into, portions of Michigan, going up into really Canada by then. And I do feel there's going to be a boundary in the middle there, that there are going to be looking at the first initiation of some freezing rain before the rain kicks in with the warm sector. But there's also going to be more snow. They're going to be breaking out by the time we get into Thursday night, heading into Friday in Maine, up into Maine, on the northern portions of Vermont, New Hampshire, as well as into Maine. And the same thing in the NAM kind of reflects that as well. So the latest 12K NAM has that coming across. Obviously, this is able to extend further out, goes out 84 hours, but this puts the good swath of snow across portions of Vermont and New Hampshire with some of the ice, and then especially into Maine, be looking at least several inches of snowfall from this particular system. And then there's the kicker coming in on the back half, pulling in some of that snow across portions of Missouri. Again, not expecting much with that little kind of kicker system, as that secondary wave will push a swath of rain showers across the southeast as we get into your Friday, afternoon time frame. But there's the snow swath on the latest 12K NAM, puts that snow across this region and swings it over, adding to those totals in portions of Maine, with those 3 to 5 inch totals up there in Maine. This won't be until Thursday night into that Friday time frame. And here's the rain amounts that we have to be concerned about. Some isolated pockets of flooding, these continuing to increase really with every update, adding to these totals. So we'll have at least an inch or two in and around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a little bit higher 3-inch amounts going northeast. And there's kind of your bullseye here. Some areas could be looking at 3 to 5 inches within this red sector here, about 1 to 2 inches further north up in Illinois, and about, closer to 1 inch, a little bit higher amounts as you extend further south across Mississippi and Alabama, getting into portions of Georgia through the day on your Saturday time frame. And heading eastbound, you can see the amounts as we extend into the eastern regions, as this will continue to push across into the deep south, extending those 1 to 2 inch rains into your Friday, Saturday time frame across the Carolinas, and a little bit lighter amounts as you head up into the northeast, into the mid-Atlantic, getting upwards to potentially about a ½ inch of rainfall, from this particular system between now and Saturday. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me in the next update where I protect you before and after the storm.